Hello and welcome to a new part of this tutorial series. Today we're going to make the old tile stick around at the bottom once it hits the ground and spawn a new tile. And again, once this tile hits the ground, a new tile is going to spawn and it's going to stay around at the bottom, and you can rotate every single tile that we have. We have a lot to do, so let's get started right away by opening the game.dart file, and let's try to spawn a new tile once we hit the bottom part of the screen or of the playing field. So let's go to the onTimeTick function and let's first off move this out of the way so we have a new function for this. Let's cut this whole if out like this, and let's make a new function. Let's call this the check for user input, so void check for user input. It is not going to have any parameters, and just paste in the if statement like that, and let's copy the function name and call it down here. Right now we're moving the tile down by 1 every single frame, but we do not want to do that. We want to check if the tile is already at the bottom, and to do that we have to figure out the Y position of the tile. So right here in the game.dart we have some kind of int board height and board width. And the board height and board width are in relative size. This means that we can draw exactly 20 points in the height and then 10 points in the width directions. So we're gonna use the board height right here. So let's copy the board height and let's go to the blocks and then the block.dart, and let's make a new function down here and let's return some kind of bool, and let's call this is at bottom, and this is just going to return true if it is at the bottom and false if it is not. And we can figure out if it is at the bottom or not if at least one of these 4 points of the block is going to be at the board height, so at 20, at the maximum size, because as you know, Dart adds the size from top to bottom, so plus y. So let's make an integer in the isBottom function and let's call this the lowest point and set it equal to 0. This is our starting point. This is the highest point that we can have. And now we can loop through all the points. So points dot for each. Let's put in another pair of parentheses, call this the point, and make a function out of it and a semicolon at the end of the for each. And in here we're just going to set up the lowest point. So if the point dot y is going to be bigger, so greater than the lowest point, then the lowest point is going to be equal to the point.y. This is how we just figure out the maximum, and there's also a function for this, but let's make it in the long way so it's quite clear. And now in here we can just check if the lowest point is greater or equal to the board height, and we can use this because we are including the game.dart. But there's still one thing, we have to subtract 1 from it because we are starting at 0 and we have 20 points. So from the indices we are going to have the Y position at exactly 90. And you can try it out. If you leave it just at the board height, you will see that the tile will fall down 1 too many points. So let's put a -1 in there. And if this is true, we want to return true because the tile is going to be at the bottom, and else we want to return false. And you could also just return the bool value right here. This is basically the same as this whole if and else statement, but just for clarity, I'm going to leave it like this. Let's now go back to the game.dart and scroll down to the onTimeTick function. And right here we can now check if the current block dot is at bottom. Then we want to spawn a new block, and else we want to just continue moving down and checking for the user input. This means that the block is not at the bottom yet and can move. And to spawn a new block, we just have to make the current block equal to the get new random block right here that we already have created in the past tutorials, like this. And if I restart the game and hit the play button, the block is going to fall, and as you can see we can rotate it and it's going to fall down. And once it hits the ground, it disappears, and we have a new block right here, spawning a different block with a different color. Awesome. But let's now try to make this block stick at the bottom. So right here, when we know that the block is at the bottom screen, we have to actually save the block. So save the block. And then we can spawn a new block right here. And to save the block, we are going to make a new class. So let's go to the blocks folder right here and let's create a new file, and let's call this the AlivePoint.dart. And this is just going to inherit from the point that we already have created. So let's open the point and look at what we have in here. We are just saving the X and Y position of some kind of variable. Awesome. And now in the AlivePoint.dart, let's import the point. And let's also import the material.dart because we are going to have to save the color of the point. The point.y has a constructor with the X and Y variable or integer that we want to save. Let's now make a class that is called AlivePoint, and it is going to extend from the point class that we created, and like this. And now we get an error because we have the 0 arguments for the point class because we're extending from it. And we want to add a color component. Let's just call this the color. And we still get an error. Let's make a constructor. This is going to take in a int x, int y, and then a color call. Let's call this like that. And like this. And this is not going to work. So if I just assign the color to the color, this is still not going to work because we get an error if we hover over it. The superclass point does not have a 0 argument constructor, which means that we have to call the superclass. And the superclass is just the class from which we extend or inherit the variables. So in the point.dart, we have a constructor with this.x and this.y. So let's now call the constructor. And to do that in Dart, you just type in super and pass in the x and y in this constructor. So what we are doing, we're just inheriting from a class that already has a int x and a int y. So these variables are in the AlivePoint as well. And then we're just adding a color. And because these two variables are defined in the point class, Dart does not know which variables we want to pass in, even though if we call them x and y, just like we did in the point.dart right here, Dart will not know which variables we want to pass into the x and y right here that we also have available in the point.dart because we inherit from the point. That is why we have to call the super method right here, or super class instantiator, which is just going to call the point constructor, which is basically something like point, and we are passing in the x and y into the point constructor. And then we are just adding our own property. So this is another way of using inheritance. In the I block, j block, and so on, we use the block class right here as our base class, and we use the inheritance just to make a constructor so we don't have to pass in the variables to instantiate the block. And this is helpful so that we don't have to actually manually instantiate all the points and pass them in every single time we want to make a new block. And in the alive class, you're basically just widening the properties of the class, which means that you can add variables or functions to make this class bigger than the point, but you don't have to retype the x and y. And we can also use the shortened constructor as well in this case by just typing int x and int y without this, because this class does not define those two variables and we have to pass them into the super variable. Instead of assigning the color in the body of the constructor, we can just do this right here in the properties. But I'm going to do it like this so that it's not as confusing as the one below. So now we can close the alive.dart file, the point.dart, block.dart, and the iblock that we opened to show you stuff. And let's work on the saving of the block. And to save it, we need some kind of list with the already existing blocks. So let's go up here where we have the perform action and current block and define a new variable. This is going to be a list of the alive points, but to be able to use it, we have to go up here and actually import the alivepoints.dart file, which is in the block. So block/alivepoints.dart. Now we can go down here and make a list of alive points. And this is just going to be called alivepoints. And it's just going to be equal to a list of alive points. And let's now copy this name. And let's try and go down here. And right here on the time tick, let's make a new function right above it. And let's call this the void save old block. And it's not going to take in any parameters. And what we want to do is basically just go to the current block dot points dot for each. And for each point in the points array, we want to do something. So let's make a function out of it and a semicolon after the for each. And we are just going to make a new alive point. So alive point and call this the new point. And this is just going to be equal to a new point. So alive point and parentheses. And this wants a int x, which is just going to be the point.x. And then the int y is going to be the point.y. And the color is going to be the current block dot color. Now we want to add the new point to the alive block list. And to change the state of a variable, which we want to not change when we rebuild the class, we have to call the setState function. And now we can access the alivepoints.add function and just pass in the new point. Now we have saved the old blocks. And to actually make use of the function, let's call the save old block function right below the save the block comment. Before we generate a new block, and we can get rid of this comment. So right now, when we are at the bottom, we are calling the save old block function, and then we are creating a new block for the current block variable that we have in the setState function. Awesome. But if I now would start the game, we are still not going to be able to see the old blocks because we are not drawing them. If you remember, we have a draw Tetris block function in which we are drawing the current block. Let's make a comment, current block. But we are not drawing the old blocks. Let's also make a new for each loop and let's call this the old blocks. And in here we want to loop through the alive list. So alive points dot for each, and again it's going to be the point, and let's make a function out of it and a semicolon at the end of the for each. And in here we want to add to the visible points list, which is a positioned list called the .add function. And as we did with the current block, we are again going to make a new positioned object for each and every point that we have saved. And the child is going to be the getTetrisPoint function, into which we pass in the point.color, not the current block.color this time, so that we save the colors, and the left point is going to be the point.x times the point size. This is the same. The top is going to be the point.y times the point size. And after the add, we still have to add a semicolon. And now if I save it and format it, Ctrl-Shift-I, if we restart the game right now and hit the play button, we are going to have a new tile spawned at the start. That's just like as it was. And once it hits the ground right here, we are going to get a new tile spawned at the top, and the tile is going to stay at the ground, which is quite awesome. And if this tile hits the ground, we are going to get a new tile right away. But we still have a couple of bugs. For example, if this tile is going to partly hit the blue tile, it's not going to stop. It's going to fall through and then get drawn in front of it, which is quite alright for now, for this stage of the tutorial. We are going to take care of it in the upcoming tutorials. I hope you enjoyed this part of the tutorial series. If you did, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment down below what you liked and did not like. And special thanks to my first Patreon supporter, StarKen69. Thank you very much for giving me a couple of cups of coffee. I greatly appreciate that, and I will see you all in the next ones. Bye!